Again, my name is James Dentley, and born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. Lived a lot of years throughout the state of Texas, Midland, Odessa, Abilene, Houston, Dallas. Run a little outfit called Steak and Ale restaurant back in 1980. How many people remember Steak and Ale? Yeah. Anybody? Steak, lobster, crime rib. I had to wear a t-shirt that said, "Marry me and eat for free." That's true story. I could hook a girl up with lobster and crab legs all day long with candles on the table. I moved from the restaurant business, decided to become an entrepreneur. After running restaurants throughout the United States of America, I opened up several businesses. Everything from nightclubs to import-export companies, contracting companies. I was in real estate for a long time. Had restaurants. I did everything I possibly could. You know, being raised in Chicago with a single mom and 3 sisters, and my mom went to the grocery store in the daytime and the dental office at night. We didn't have a lot, but we had a lot of love. We taught to love and support each other every single day. My sisters never had an argument. My wife and I never even had arguments to this day. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that, but I also want to tie together the things we've seen in this event and what we've experienced today, because it really comes down to the psychology of your communication, and I want to talk about that. You know, I was going to talk about how to build a successful business, but we got a lot of people done that, so no sense we're going behind them. Okay, we talk to people talking about breakthrough in your life. We can go there, but I'll tie some of that in. But it comes down to communication, because even on a cellular level, before we had thought, we had to learn how to communicate for our nervous system to connect, just so we can breathe every single day. Does that make sense? Yeah. So communication is very, very key. And as a speaker, I've trained speakers now for over a quarter of a century. I've spoken all over the world, been very honored. But I remember the first day they asked me to speak, and I was scared to death. How many people have spoken? You have a fear of speaking. You had that nervous energy. Now, the number one thing I want you to remember, and I want you to write some of this stuff down. If you have a fear of communicating or speaking, that's because you're worried about you. How you're going to show up, about judgment, how people want to view you. Does that make sense? Number one is never about you, it's always about that audience. It's always about the other person. So the first rule I like to teach is that when you're speaking, the speaker is never the star. The speaker is the director, and the audience is the star. And the only focus that the director has to help that star have the performance they want in their life, to get the results they want in their life, to show up to get their own personal Oscar. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, when you're speaking, what are you going to speak about? Well, how do you identify what we call your gold medal talent? What is it that you do really well? What is that space for you? Because the big challenge most people have is that they don't have a clear understanding to get that clarity on what they want to talk about. So they talk about several things, and it's hard to drive a brand when you're all over the place. We have one philosophy that marketing can make you a lot of money, but branding creates your wealth. Because that will give you laser focus on the audience you need to speak to, and you stay there with the audience. Does that make sense? So I want to talk about the communication, the psychology of communication, and I want to talk about how you identify your gold medal talent. Now, this is one thing I like to teach people. Well, you can send everyone you know a text. Send about 10 text messages out, and you ask them one question. You ask 10 people that you do business with, 10 people you associate with. Say, I want you to answer one question, and I want you to answer with one word. What do you like most about me? What I do really well? What do you respect about me? And you'll get your consensus there, because you know you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's going to help you identify the gold medal talent. Now, it comes down back to how are you thinking? Where's that thought process coming from? Because what you live, you learn. What you learn, you practice. And what you practice, you become. See, there's only 2 ways you can change your life: the books you read or the people you spend time on. There's only 2 ways. Because you have access to the information that's in front of you and the inspiration that's in front of you. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay? So you have to start with having a vision. What is it that you really want to create? I was in Disneyland last week. I was getting an award, the Be Great Humanitarian Award. Now, I learned a lot of key things here. Number one, I was listening to a gentleman on the stage earlier. He talked about leadership. And in Disney, they said management is how to get things done, but leadership is who to be. Who you're going to show up as. That's going to develop culture. Does that make sense? So what is your vision? What is it that you want to create? What do you see in the mind's eye? There's a story about a kid named Johnny. He's in 3rd grade. He's in art class. He's drawing a picture. The teacher looks over his shoulder and says, Johnny, what are you drawing? Johnny says, well, I'm drawing a picture of God. The teacher smiles and says, Johnny, nobody knows what God looks like. Johnny looks at the teacher and says, well, they will in a minute. Your vision is your vision. We live in a world today of innovation. We live in a world today of creation, all driven from imagination. Just think about it. We just had an African-American woman captain a ship with SpaceX to go out of space last week. Years ago, Amelia Earhart, they said a woman couldn't even fly. We have women pilots all over the place. Does that make sense? The world is changing. It's about innovation. It's about imagination. The second thing I learned from Walt Disney is this. One of the executives said, James, Disney World will never be finished as long as there's imagination. Write that down. You're never done as long as there's imagination. You look at all these speakers up here with their great careers. They've done some incredible things, but they're still doing something else. What's next? What's next? Why is it that someone who wins a championship in the sport of their choice, the moment they win, they hold up two fingers. What do two fingers mean? Repeat. They haven't even got off the court. They haven't got off the field. They're thinking about next year as always, what's next? Not that you don't enjoy what you have and where you are. You do that every single day. You choose to be happy. The thinker thinks, and the prover proves. I call it the captain and the crew. You see, when the captain gives an order, the crew has to obey. Aye, aye. That's your conscious mind, the captain. The subconscious is the crew. If the captain does not give an order, then the crew has mutiny. They have parties. So you have to be intentional, because when the captain says attention, then there's prosperous intention. Attention breeds intention. They all line up. And that's how your body is communicating with itself to drive energy. My last book was called The 5 Frequencies of High Performance. You communicate through feelings, through energy. Most of communication is nonverbal. How many people have been out somewhere and you can tell somebody was staring at you? Sure? Yeah. Because energy is real. You ever been around somebody who said, why are you so happy? What are you hiding? Something's going on. Are you pregnant? Are you getting married? Something's going on. How many people can read that energy? Or you know something's wrong with someone that you're talking about. Something's going on. Something's not right. It's about frequency. It's about energy. But when you tie the psychology of communication together, they start to blend, and now you become intuitive and instinctive. And now you can feel be part of the universe that all of us are made part of. Give you an example. Let's talk about personality traits. When you're speaking to an audience of people, there are 4 basic personalities. We all have all 4, but we're anchored in 1, 2, or usually 3 of them. I want to illustrate it like this. I call them the shark, the dolphin, the urchin, and then the whale. The shark. Sharks are money motivated. They're driven. They're very competitive people. They're people who will go through a brick wall to win. How many people know someone who has a shark personality? Show of hands. Now they dress in power clothes and like real sexy, expensive cars, expensive jewelry. That's your sharks. Does that make sense? But they come off a little abrasive sometimes. They come off as though they don't have a lot of empathy. Now your dolphins like to have fun. Dolphins like to wear colors. You see somebody with blue or green in their hair, that's a dolphin. They got big earrings and big jewelry, that's a dolphin. Dolphins don't come on time to anything, but they're the life of the party when they get there. Are y'all with me? Dolphins don't make up their bed every day because their philosophy is, why make it up? I'm getting right back in it in a few hours. Dolphins are not neat people. They have 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 junk drawers. Does that make sense? Look at their trunk. You can tell if that's a dolphin. How many people know a dolphin? Very good. A dolphin cannot stand a lecture. It'll make their behind go to sleep. But the urchin loves information. They're very conservative. They need information. They need facts. These would be your engineers. If somebody's an engineer, they're urchin. If they're wearing a dress shirt, they have a pocket here, and they have some things like a tablet, or a writing tablet, or a phone in the pocket, that's the urchin. They're dressed in conservative colors. They learn how to put brown, blue, and gray together in the same outfit. A dolphin would never do that. Give me some red, pig, give me something sparkly so I can have some life in it. Does that make sense? But they're very analytical. They love things to be in order. They cannot stand things in disarray. They don't like things to start late. They get irritated when you start late. How many people know an urchin? Very good. And then the whale. Whales are giving and supportive. Whales love causes. Whales are social, actively people. They want to make a difference. They're soft-spoken. When they wear an outfit, sometimes a whale will sit on grandma's couch and bend right into the furniture. They like to blend in. They don't really care about the money. They're not driven by that. They're driven is, are we making a difference? Are we helping? Is there love? Now, how many people know somebody who's a whale? Now, we have all 4 personalities, but based upon how you're communicating, it's going to determine how you're received on the other side of it. Because you have to learn not only to speak into the listening of another human being, but learn how to speak into their nervous system. So it's not about what they hear, it's also about how they feel. Does that make sense? And the best way to do that is become fully self-expressed, to release yourself. Become innocent, become vulnerable. That's the power of humility. You listen to all the speakers today, they live in a space, I was watching them on stage, they all live in a space of what I call quiet intensity. They know that they know that they know. They come up and they have fun. Does that make sense? They know their stuff and they're just delivering their truth. Are you with me? Okay. So we have all four personality types. So when you're speaking to an audience, you have to know how to paint, unless you know who you're talking to. If I'm talking to a group of engineers, I'm going to anchor my talk towards analytics, towards facts. Are you with me? You know, Aristotle created ethos, pathos, and logos. Emotion, documentation, okay? Backed up by facts. You know, how are we going to communicate so we tap into the listening of a human being without them even knowing it? You know, Dave Corbin always talks about, James, sometimes you talk a lot real fast. I want to talk about that because now I want to shift from personalities to how to use your voice like a soundtrack of a movie. How many of you all notice when you go to a movie, the movie has an emotion that you get, whether it be fear, whether it be you feel real mushy inside, you have a tear, or there's always an emotion driven by a movie. How many people notice that? The anchor of that emotion is in the soundtrack. It's in the dialogue and the script, but the soundtrack is something you don't pay that much attention to. But how many people ever notice you can hear a song, it makes you feel a certain way? It takes you to a place. Does that make sense? So when you put the soundtrack with the story and the soundtrack allow you to take a person somewhere within themselves they can never go on by themselves. So now you know how to use your voice like a soundtrack, but blend in the personality types. So you keep painting, you keep touching. You keep touching. That means people don't walk out, they don't get sleepy, they don't leave the room, you have an undivided attention. So now we're going to play with the soundtrack. Now, if you have a pen and paper, I want you to write this down. On the upper left side, I want you to write loud and fast. Loud and fast, underneath that write impact. Loud and fast gives you impact. What? Say impact. Say it again, say impact. Loud and fast is impact. Okay, so when you set yourself on fire, the world will come out and see you burn. That's impact. It jars the nervous system. It chokes. Does that make sense? Okay, loud and slow is for emphasis. On the right side, right, loud and slow, emphasis. Now you're going to drive home the point. When you set yourself on fire, the world will come out and see you burn. Emphasis. Now loud doesn't mean you scream like I scream. It can be you talk soft. When you set yourself on fire, the world will come out and see you burn. It's the energy behind the words. Does that make sense? Then you go low and fast. Low and fast is for engagement. Now, when I'm going high and fast, I'm talking to sharks. I'm joining the nervous system, making a move. We're talking to dolphins. They move fast. That means they move. That's why when you go deep sea fishing, you don't just throw the hook into the water. The boat's moving, and the fish chase the lure. So you're not catching fish. The fish are really catching you. You zoom it past them, and they get caught because it's fast. Does that make sense? Okay. So now, low and fast is for engagement. When I'm talking to my urchins, if I'm low and fast, I don't need you to remember everything I said or write it down, but you know that I know that I know. And that builds your credibility with the urchin, because you have the information. Does that make sense? So that's for engagement, okay? So when you set yourself on fire, the world will come and see you burn. That's low and fast. And then low and slow is for emotion. Now, emotion, you drop your voice, because that's the language of love. You don't go up to a person and say, I love you! Would you marry me? How many people would agree with me that's not pretty much not the best way you want to go about that? Okay. How about, I love you. I want you to be my wife, my partner, my best friend. You go low and you slow. And you paint, and you touch personality types, but you're also speaking into their body. How they're going to receive it, how they feel, based on how you're delivering the information. Does that make sense? All right. The next thing is that, especially if you're going to be on stage, I call it my F30. On your first 30 seconds of getting on that stage, how are you going to own it? How are you going to place yourself in this state? Now, it begins before you even get on the stage, but when you get on the stage, how are you going to get the audience and captivate the audience? Now, I'll give you one more with the personality types. Let's do an introduction. What's your name? Sylvia? Okay, I want to introduce a young lady named Sylvia. Sylvia has documented herself in the industry. She knows 100% of the facts and information on how to help you become successful. Who am I speaking to? Which personality? The urgent facts, right? Sylvia has positioned herself to be on the other side of the money. As a matter of fact, when Sylvia writes a check, the bank bounce. Who am I talking to? The shark. Right? Sylvia loves to have a lot of fun. You're going to enjoy this presentation. You're really going to find yourself laughing and learning. Who am I talking to? Do you lower your voice and say, but the most important, She's willing to help everyone who's willing to learn. So on a psychological level, before Sylvia speaks, you already locked in the personalities to Sylvia. Does that make sense? Y'all learning something? Hey, you can use this at home. Now another thing that my wife and I do is we call it being with. I do this in my speaker programs when I was training. Being with is when you engage and lock in with another human being. You can practice this with your spouse. But when I used to do my speaker programs, I'd have a person, two people that don't know each other, stand very close, almost touching, looking at each other in the eyes. They're not staring. You're not trying to read the other person. You're allowing the person to see you. You let them see you. You open up. You become innocent. People get very nervous. They start to laugh. They get giddy because it's so uncomfortable. Because people you don't know are in your personal space. But when you're speaking, whether you're a teacher, whether you're doing a corporate presentation, whether you're doing a team meeting, you have to be able to communicate on a level that gets you the results that you're looking for. Does that make sense? And you do that by your voice and understanding who it is you're talking to. If you don't know, you paint, you touch, you paint, you paint. So let's do an exercise with our voice as a soundtrack. Everybody stand up. And we're going to go loud and fast. I want you to repeat after me. Say A-E-I-O-U. A-E-I-O-U. Say again. A-E-I-O-U. 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 Now I want you to pay attention to how your nervous system, your body shifts. Repeat after me. Say A-E-I-O-U. A-E-I-O-U. There's a shift. Now we're going to go low and fast. Say A-E-I-O-U. 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 Now watch this. Now you go low and slow. A-E-I-O-U. If you're in tune with your body, you can see how your nervous system shifts every time you communicate language. In yourself and in other people as well. This is important because you have to learn, first of all, how to be intentional in your own life. How to calm it down. How to summon the power that you don't have to go seek it, it's already there. Bob Parker says it best, you don't have to go get energy, you are energy. Does that make sense? And you pull that energy and control it and harness it, even on the softest point. A-E-I-O-U. Does that make sense? He says around. Now we're going to talk about some psychological things and mindset, because you have to blend these things together with your patterns of thinking. So your thoughts impact your words. Your words will impact your actions, will influence your actions. Repeating actions will give you the habits. That's why the poet said, who am I? I'm your constant companion. I'm your greatest helper and your heaviest burden. I can lift you upward, or I can drag you down to failure. If you teach me to do a thing repeatedly, I'll begin to do it automatically. I'm easily managed, but you must be firm with me. I'm the first to all those who are great. And last, those who are failures as well. Those who are great, I have made great. Those who are failures, I have made failures. I am not a machine, yet I operate with the precision of a machine, yet the intelligence of a human being. But if you teach me and train me, I'll lay the work at your feet, but if you're easy with me, I will destroy you. You may run me for profit, you can run me for ruin. Makes no difference to me. Who am I? I am called habit. Habit is my name. We're driven by our habits, by our rituals. Habits and rituals. And you only get good at what you do often. So you have to change the pattern. And it really starts with who you're spending time around. That's why it's so important to get mentorship or to get coaching and to invest in it. Because, see, when you invest, you're a better mentee. You pay attention to show up when you spend your money. Is that true? Most of the time. You guys have health club memberships. You know we never go. I'm talking to people that can relate to it. Are y'all with me? But you make the mentor or the coach a better teacher because they show up as you show up. It's like playing tennis. You hit that ball over, you hit it back. You hit it over, you hit it back. But once they hit it, you hit it over, and it doesn't come back. It loses some of the momentum for that mentee, for that mentor. Does that make sense? Find a different way to communicate. So you have to get people to get in agreement, because communication and enrollment is all about agreement. Write that down. Communication and enrollment is about agreement, bringing people to an agreement. Does this make sense? If this makes sense, raise your hand. See, when you raise your hand, that's agreement. Are you with me? Yes. When you say yes, that's agreement. You got that? That's agreement. It's about bringing people to agreement. And to bring people to agreement, first it's better to find out where they are by asking the right questions. Because people like to talk. Who's the person's favorite subject? Themselves. to open it up. Because most people just want to be heard. We're in conversation with people, and before we can ask them a question and tell them about their life, we're just blabbing about what we do and giving them our elevator pitch. We're going on and on and on and on about ourselves. The power comes in listening. Because when you listen, you make that person important, and then they like you. They like you because you made them feel important. Because they are. Earlier today, Don was talking about how the trail of people in life impacts somebody else in the next generation. Like the builder of a school that was able to get the teacher a place to work, that was able to impact the student that was able to graduate and go out there and create a career, and then become an entrepreneur, and then write a book, and the book influence inspire somebody else. What does it say is every life matters. Everything you do matters. It always does, it always has. You will always touch people beyond the scope of your understanding. That's the great thing about Secret Knock, because Secret Knock has created a culture of collaboration, a culture of love, and a culture where like-minded people, like spirit, like energy, like frequency people come together, and that's why it's so easy to network and collaborate and meet different people. Does that make sense? But who are you going to be when you walk out of this environment? Because you can't take all of us home with you. You're going to go out there in hostile waters. What are you going to do? See, you have the advantage because you have the information, because you already understand some things they don't understand. How you communicate, how you're listening with intention. Are you with me? Yeah. You're understanding that if you operate from a spirit of love, that's the control factor. See, there's a difference between loving a person for themselves or loving a person for you. Does that make sense? Yes. Because when you love a person for you, you mean you love them until they piss you off. Until they irritate the crap out of you or do something you don't like or you feel like something's been taken from you. Does that make sense? But if you love a person for themselves, you love them understanding they get to be who they want to be and make their choices. Because you can love a person over there. You can love them across the street. But if I love you for you, that means your actions does not spark a negative reaction in me. I'm always in control. I've mastered the internal mechanism of my emotions, of how I'm going to show up in your life. And that's all I can do. How many people realize this? You can't fix other people? Realize that? We would have fixed our parents first, right? Can't fix our kids, right? Half the time we can't even figure ourselves to do what we need to do. Does that make sense? Okay? But this is what you can control here, and the spirit of how you do it. So don't be afraid of it. Because here's what I found out. When you love everyone, and I love each and every one of you. I don't have to know you, but I love you. I already know you because you're here. But if I can love everyone, that means I don't require love from an individual to fulfill me. See, my wife is full of love. I'm full of love with her back. We don't have arguments. She's one of the smartest person I know. Everything the speaker said today, all the speakers, she could look at me and say, I told you, and I'm glad she didn't look at me and say it, but I got it. Because she understands frequency. Does that make sense? She's a double scientist, a physicist, geospatial analyst, some more degrees I don't know. Carol Scott, Dr. Carol Scott, get us down. You see how we know it? Oh, there she is. Perfect. Whoa, I'm looking back there. Okay, there you go. You know, that's been my friend for, we've known each other for over 20 years. You know, we've been married for over 6 years. But every day is love like fresh flowers from the garden, every single day. Because with intention. Because when you make the decision, this is how you're going to show up, it doesn't matter what happens outside of you, it's what happens inside of you. So you got to know how to talk to yourself. How do you empower yourself? Marissa was talking about that inner conversation you have. Does that make sense? How many of you guys ever talk to yourself? Be honest. How many of you guys are embarrassed by talking to yourself? Yeah, how many of you guys, no, you guys are not embarrassed? Okay, let me ask you a question. You ever been in your car driving and you were talking to yourself and somebody pulled up beside you and you act like you were singing? It's just so loud, right? Because talking to yourself is actually the act of a crazy person. You go downtown in any major city, people are talking to themselves. You don't go near these people, am I right or wrong? But Carter G. Woodson once said, every now and then I must talk to myself because sometimes I'm in need of an intelligent conversation. But when you're talking to yourself, what is that conversation like? Have you read Think and Grow Rich for Women? Have you read Outwitting the Devil to make the parallels from 1939 to what's happening in today's world? How do they have that genius? Read any spiritual book, whatever that denomination would be, what's the correlation? How do you line up with that? What does it really mean? And how do you find a life you can operate on path and purpose in a sense of peace every single day? I remember years ago, I went to the doctor to get a routine physical. I was a third-degree black belt in Japanese karate and a third-degree brown belt in judo. 200 pounds, lean body muscle. I go to the doctor, they said, we want you to come and have a chest x-ray, and then we do an MRI. I said, why? He said, well, you ever smoked? I said, I've never smoked anything in my life. I took the MRI, they said, well, you have sarcoidosis of the lungs. I said, what does that mean? Your lungs are excessively scarred. Anybody around you smoke? I said, nobody smokes around me. I've never smoked anything, but my lungs were scarred. And I never had a symptom until they told me the diagnosis. And then a month later, I'm like, I can't breathe. So they put me on a drug called prednisone. Anybody familiar with prednisone? Oh man, they told me I'd be on it for 4 months, 4 months turned to 8 years. What's one of the side effects? Yeah, I went from 286 pounds to 374. And every time I got off of it, I got sick. I went to a health camp and learned about eating spiritually and eating natural. I dropped 120 pounds. Then I go to the doctor to get a routine physical. They said, we see PSA kind of high. I said, what's high? He said, well, high is 6. I said, what's mine? He said, 62. So you got cancer. No problem. Because see, one thing about me, I'm going to be positive no matter what. See, it's not how did you die. We all die. It's how did you live. Now, what did you gain, but what did you give? You see, these are the merits that measure the worth of every man and every woman, regardless of birth. Now, what was their station but had their heart? How did you choose to play your God-given part? They wanted me to do chemo, no chemo. They wanted me to have surgery, no surgery. They were saying, okay, what about radiation? I said, I'll do half of the treatments. And I'll do the radiation for halfway. Let's see what happens. I did the radiation. It worked, but I was positive every day. I was in there inspired because I teach my children to be positive. My son came home one day, he said, Dad, I'm afraid I failed my math test. I said, no, James, I said, no. In this house, we have to be positive. Then my son said, okay, Dad, I'm positive I failed my math test. See, I tell him, Smarty had a party, but nobody came. But laughter is always good because I choose that point. My wife and my family watch me work my business every single day. Never complain, never fail. Because we gotta leave sometimes. I've been cancer-free now for 4 years. The doctor said 6 more months. I'm cancer-free. But how do you choose to live in each moment? What choices are you making in living the life? Because life chooses life. But see, in our brain, we're in conflict. You can say, I'm great, I'm motivated, I'm a conqueror. But then your brain says, no, you're not. You know everybody money. You know you're crazy. You know you just broke up with your boyfriend. You know the girl just left you. See, your brain is going to be in conflict with what you're trying to state. So now you have to change the conversation and use this computer for how it's meant to be used and say, why am I showing up every single day happy and healthy and alive every single day? I'm not going yet. I get to choose how I go, how I live. Does that make sense? Because we are contract to life, we all got to go. Does that make sense? But how do you live each day? That's the choice. That's the choice you get to make. Are you going to start being happy? Don't wait for somebody to make you happy. Just be. Just be. Management is getting things done. Leadership is who to be. You get to pick that every day, no matter in the worst of times. The worst of times, because when you start dwelling on the thing, you'll manifest that. That's what Job said when he said, the thing I have feared has come upon me. You fear it, you manifest it, because whatever you want is what's going to grow. Does that make sense? Are you with me? Because what Sharon was talking about was called a cattle mentality. Want to be great with unlimited potential? But talk to be average. A cow. Cow's in this little pen, walking around, moo, moo. How much does a cow weigh? A lot. Sharon knows. How much does a cow weigh? You got a lot of cows. How big is a fish that holds a cow in? Not that big, right? Okay. So the cavalry can knock the fence over and just go about his business. But he just goes, moo. And another cow will be born, a little calf, without having a family meeting, says, moo. And they just go around. And you can kill a cow, and the cow has relatives. They got a mother, sister, brother. You can kill a cow in front of other cows. Should another cow say, get off of my brother? But not moo. She should have got so fat. She had it coming, told her. But then one cow jumps that fence. He doesn't jump that fence. Does everybody follow? No. Some says, where she thinks she's going? Who he think he is? He'll be back. Moo. And they keep going. Because they've been trained. So now it's about, and secretknock is about being retooled, retrained. Not so much retraining, but refined or refurbished to come back to your original state where you're born to be. You know, there's a movie called Any Given Sunday with Al Pacino. It's a football movie. And in this movie, they had a very tumultuous season with their team. A lot of drama, a lot of adversity. And Al Pacino gets him in the locker room in a championship game. He gets the team together. He said, look, life and football, and I believe life is about a game of inches. Inches. Nobody has to run the whole 100 by themselves. Inch by inch, we can get a first down. Inch by inch, you can get a fumble or you can miss a pass. That inch, single inches. And when you have a team, when you have a collective, when you have like-minded individuals, you can't go home with them, but they're always with you. My mother left here 2 years ago. I talk to her every single day. She's still here. I still tell jokes to my grandmother who died in the 60s. I go to the funeral, I still tell jokes like I did when I was an 8-year-old kid. Because I get to own that. That's our thing. She don't have to be here. I was a kid. This is what I do. Does that make sense? And you can choose that path. I haven't always been here. But I was been this day. You know, but I'll tell you this. Inch by inch, it's a cinch. So when you look at this audience today, and you say, okay, we got 2 more days of this secret knock. You may know the secret knock, but if you're at the wrong door, well, you don't get access to it. You may be in the right door, but you don't know the secret knock, and they don't ignore you because you're not recognized. Does that make sense? You could not have the secret knock, or you could not have the right door, and you're just wandering, like most children. But you all draw from each other. We all learn from each other. Everyone is a great example or a terrible reminder. They inspire you who you want to become, and remind you who you don't want to become. Does that make sense? And you choose that every single day with intention. You live your life every single day.